your hand on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now!
And I'll bet your mother had a loud bark.
Hello, this is Morning Coffee with the Chiefs. I am your host, Patrick Jordan, retired law enforcement. And on this show, we go over movies or television shows involving law enforcement, crime, or related subjects. I usually invite two guests on, and we go over the movie, we review it. We talk about our own experiences. We talk about what's going on in the movie, and sometimes we comment on the politics of the day. On this show, I got a couple of great guests, but before I get into my show and my guests, I want to talk about the Los Angeles Mission. I am on the board of the LA Mission Foundation Board, which we raise funds for the LA Mission, who provides services to the homeless in Skid Row. And as you can feel, there's a little crispness in the air today. I mean, it's a little bit cooler. Fall is coming, and that usually is the harbinger of the LA Mission's Thanksgiving Day celebration. So the day before Thanksgiving, the Los Angeles Mission provides a meal to the people on Skid Row with all the trimmings. So it's turkey, pumpkin pie, you name it. I worked it a couple of times. I'm passing out pumpkin pie to everybody. And when they do that, they also provide other services, medical services, mental health services, and outreach services to hopefully bring some of the folks who are on the streets off the streets and integrate them back into society. So in addition to giving them a meal, a holiday meal, they use it as an outreach effort. But the LA Mission is a faith-based organization, the losangelesmission.org. You can go to their website and check them out. And they don't get any government funding. So they rely on donations from people like me and you to provide these services. Now, I'm asking you, if you're a regular guest on or regular viewer to my show, I'm asking you to make a donation to the Los Angeles Mission, losangelesmission.org, $25, $50, $100, anything helps. And go to the losangelesmission.org and make your donation today. Do your good deed for today. So today's show, I'm going to do the movie called The Black Dahlia. And I have some great guests on. Now, this crew of people who are my guests also did the movie LA Confidential. And I got one who's got some inside information on the case, and we'll share some of that information later on in the show. So you got to stick around and watch the show to get the inside scoop on who one of the investigators way back when thought was the real suspect of the Black Dahlia murder, Elizabeth Short murder. So anyways, let's bring on my first guest. My first guest is retired Lieutenant John Baylis. He retired from Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, 30 plus years in law enforcement. He is also a film aficionado, right? He likes films. He does some great research for the shows. He knows people that he can look at somebody on the screen and go, oh, I know that actor. He's this guy. He was in this. He was in that. So he's a really good guy to have on the show. John and I worked together for many, many years. He was a workhorse for me. He did a really good job, and he's a really smart guy too. He's got 2 master's degree. You wouldn't know it by looking at him, but he is a really pretty smart guy. So, John, how you doing today? And thank you for coming on the show.
Good, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How's everything in Nevada?
It's cooling off. Able to walk my dogs more.
Well, can you make a donation to the LA Mission for me? I want to feel like I'm having some impact here. There's Christmas, and you know what it looks like down there. It's like zombies walking around. It's absolutely worth it. Fentanyl. It's got, fentanyl. I mean, methamphetamine used to be the drug that was killing most of the people on Skid Row 5 years ago. Now it's fentanyl.
Oh yeah,
And
big time.
and I was warning people 3 years ago, fentanyl's going to take it over. But they're like evil step twins, right? I mean, one is fentanyl, one is methamphetamine, but they're killing everybody, right? And homelessness.
70,000 people last year on fentanyl death.
Yeah, and I just think homelessness is exploding, but not just in LA, but San Francisco and California and the West Coast, because of that a decision out of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that says you can't enforce camping laws here. Anyways, and you add that with fentanyl, and it's just getting out of control. And then you have the progressive policies of California and Washington State and Oregon State. It's just people are dying because we don't got our act together. But the LA Mission does; they do a pretty good job. And thank you for coming on my show today. Before we get into too many details, though, let's bring on our second guest. He is a retired sergeant from the Long Beach Police Department. He is also the son of a police officer, the grandson of a police officer, both who work for LAPD, and that is Buz Williams, retired sergeant, Long Beach PD. He also writes a blog, right? You still writing your blog there out in Prescott there, Buz?
Yeah, a weekly column on Sundays. Every Sunday I come out with my my radical right opinions and they pay me for it, so I keep doing it.
So you on Sundays you preach to the readers, right?
I preach the truth, right?
You preach the truth. Okay. Anyway, so Buz has some inside information. I'm going to ask Buz to keep it to himself a little bit as the suspect is revealed in the movie. Then we'll start talking about suspects, the real suspects in the Black Dahlia case. And but this team both did LA Confidential, right? So I wanted to invite you guys back. Buz had some information on the Gangster Squad, which was kind of key to LA Confidential, and it's kind of a little bit has a connection here too. Talked about the 40s and 50s and how LAPD and LA City were dealing with gangsters, and which kind of gets intermixed in this story. Now, you guys both watched the show or the movie. I have to tell you, it was after watching LA Confidential and really liking LA Confidential, I was actually disappointed in this movie. It didn't have the same. It just wasn't as smart as LA Confidential. LA Confidential, you get the clues here and there in the movie, and you kind of know where it's going, and it's still a surprise. But this one, it was just. I mean, at the end, I was really disappointed. What do you think, John?
Well, I agree. It was a totally different type of movie. A lot of stuff. Elroy even admitted that he put in the movie that wasn't accurate at all. He just put it in for salaciousness and for dramatic effect, the usual licensing that Hollywood does in movies. It was really ridiculous.
Well, somebody's already talked about Dr. George Hodel. We will get into Dr. George Hodel later in the show as we talk about possible suspects, and he's one of them, right? And But Buz, what'd you think of the movie in comparison to LA Confidential and maybe just other movies? What'd you think?
Well, I'd say LA Confidential was like Academy Award movie, and this was more like a TV movie. I mean, it wasn't. Although TV movies can be pretty good sometimes, this was. It's
a B movie.
Yeah. It was more like a B movie, and it didn't have all the. It didn't seem nearly as authentic as LA Confidential was.
Right, I agree with you there, and I gave it kind of a C plus. We haven't been rating movies on the show, but I give it a kind of a C plus. Yeah. See, I like the version portrayed in American Horror Story, starving doctor addiction and psychosis. Well, I don't know about that lady.
I haven't seen it. I don't watch Horror Story.
The real big thing about this is it's an unsolved murder, so anybody can give license as to who the suspect is, right? I mean, you can draw some modest inference for a suspect, and say it's them and write a book, and I'll get into that a little bit. But in terms of, I will say what I like about LA Confidential and what I liked about this movie is I like the references to historical facts. And historical stuff going on. I like the film locations where they go back to you know, I like the whole Art Deco kind of look and the streamlined modern architecture that was kind of in vogue at the time. I like all that stuff.
And
And
they had I mean, it really was authentic. You see in one scene in LA Confidential, you see a Helms truck in the background. You know, I mean, just little things like that give it authenticity, I think.
Yeah, the choreography, the stuff about that age and that time was pretty spot on. They moved a few years, some things that happened, and trampled over a few years. But other than that, they had a lot of stuff that was righteous and real. The corruption on LAPD, that was real in LA Confidential. But this movie, in fact, there's a couple other things, and I'll bring them up later.
Well, even the dress, you know, the hats, the overcoats, the language they use. I mean, Buzz, your grandpa was on the LAPD and your dad was, and so you probably grew up hearing some of that stuff, right? That's how they talked a little bit, right? And that's the way they were.
Yeah. Well, they couldn't really put all the stuff my dad said in the movie because it would have been XXX rated. But yeah.
Well, but it's. I always look at this. I know we said it in LA Confidential. These are guys who all fought in World War II. You know,
World
these
War
are
II,
all of them. You probably still have some veterans from World War I on the department. These are people who lived through very difficult times. It's funny. I was listening to somebody talk about sometimes you got to have a hard guys to take people down, and he was referencing law enforcement, right? And but unfortunately, there are not a lot of guys who have that kind of hard experience anymore. I mean, everybody's soft, right? They've never been in a fight, as we talked a little bit about, and they're just soft folks. They don't go to the gym. I mean, too many people in front of an Xbox, you know, playing games.
Great thumbs.
Different, you know, and here we got guys that are just happy to survive. Their buddies, not all their buddies survived. It was rife. It was ugly. I mean, if you fought in the Pacific, the Japanese pulled no punches. They were brutal, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And it was a brutal fight in Germany as well, right? I mean, it was like Bastogne, and then you know, and then a few years later, guys end up going to fight in Korea, which is another brutal conflict, right? You know, another brutal. And so this is the generation of guys that we're seeing in this movie, right? People who maybe fought in World War I and certainly fought in World War II, and now they're policemen, right? And this is the kind of people we're seeing. So these are hard guys. These are plain speaking guys. These are guys that are living for today. And there's a lot of smokers in the movie. I noticed that too. But that was also consistent, right? Everybody smoked.
Yeah, everybody smoked.
Were you guys were you in the military, Buzz? I don't think John was.
I was in the National Guard from 1970 to 1976, and in my academy class, I was if I'd been in 6 years before I got in the academy in 74, I would have gotten the 10 points veterans preference that they gave. But I was the only male in my class who didn't get it. And those guys were always calling me a draft dodger and everything. And I'd tell them, hey, wait a minute. You know, my job from 1970 to 1976 was to protect the women and children of Southern California from the Viet Cong. And if you'll check, there was not one attack during that time. I said, although I agree they conquered Garden Grove and parts of Westminster, but that was after I left. So.
Well, I did. I was told by somebody who went in the military that they, you know, when you were on at attention on parade, whatever, and they did parade rest sometimes, whatever, they would let you take a smoke break. So a lot of guys ended up taking up smoking just because they're allowed to get a break and fall out and get a smoke break, which really kind of drove veterans to smoke a lot. If you weren't a smoker, you probably did, and you got free cigarettes. And so I don't know. It just seems like
and in the K rations and C rations, they had little packs of 4 cigarettes in them. You know,
so you were encouraged to smoke by free product and to get a break every now and then.
Yeah,
so, hey,
I never did smoke, but I had tuberculosis as a child. Primary tuberculosis. Was in the hospital for a year from when I was 4 to 5. So I was, my parents, although both of them smoked, they discouraged me from the habit. I think I had like 10 cigarettes when I was about 15, and that was about it.
I tried it once and said, "Oh, why would anybody?"
Me too. I tried to be cool in 8th grade. Had like
See.
2 puffs. I coughed for a week, and I was never, like,
Never
yeah.
again. Yeah, you know, I hung out with the jocks, so it was easier to say.
Yeah.
That's okay. No. All right. So this movie, The Black Dahlia, it is it was based upon a book by James Elroy, who did L.A. Confidential, and which is why we wanted to do this movie. And I think he's got some other movies that maybe we'll bring this team together and we'll go over for. But it was released. The Black Dahlia was released in 2006. It's a neo-noir crime thriller, and it was directed by Brian De Palma, who's actually a pretty good director, although I don't think this was his best effort. And
No, it wasn't.
written by Josh Friedman. Now, obviously, the stars in the movie. I'm looking at the ladies in the movie. Scarlett Johansson, beautiful. You know, she's a beautiful lady, and Hilary Swank, and then we got Aaron Eckhart and Josh Hartnett are the main stars in the movie, and the gals are beautiful in here. I've seen these guys in other movies too. I think was it Josh? I can't remember, or Josh or Aaron. I can't remember which one is which, but he was in that movie about smoking. Remember that? Yeah. He was a lobbyist for smoking. It was a really funny movie, but he was also in
Never saw it.
L.A. Battlefield. He played the sergeant, and they're fighting some aliens that have landed in Los Angeles. The battle for L.A. So, and I liked him in that character. He's a pretty good actor. And as I went through the list of people acting, I can't pick. I noticed, oh wow, I watched the movie and I didn't realize Rose McGowan was in the movie. Rose McGowan.
She had a small part in it.
She had a small part, and she's the big Me Too lady. She's calls out Harvey Weinstein. So we got to applaud. I mean, sometimes I see her stuff and I don't know where she's coming from, but you know what? She's the one that took down, helped bring attention to Harvey Weinstein. So man, she gets an A in my book for doing that, because he's a scumbag. Yes. And but so this movie was released and it was highly anticipated. It was a little disappointing, but it was based upon the murder of Elizabeth Short, which occurred in 1947. I guess we should put a picture of Elizabeth Short up there so everybody can see who she is.
A beautiful gal.
Can we? Yeah, there she is. And I mean, I don't know if this is just a promo shot of her, but she's very pleasant looking. And like a lot of people who come to Los Angeles and Hollywood, sounds like she was hoping to make a break. And as John and I saw, we both worked Hollywood for a very long time. A lot of good-looking kids come and they don't make it and they get exploited, which seems like is what happened to Elizabeth Short. Although there's some argument whether she got into the seedier side or not in Hollywood, whether that's true or not. But she definitely ran into the wrong guy, at least in 1947, one night in 1947. But it is about her murder, and it is unsolved, which just opens up the door for everybody to have an opinion on who did it. And there's been a bunch of movies, TV shows, or whatever that have been made about, and podcasts made about the Black Dahlia because it's unsolved. That's really one of the big things about it. And before we kind of, we ought to get in the movie. Let's start. The first scene is Zoot Suit, right? I listed it as Zoot Suit.
Zoot Suit riots.
And this gets right where you would talk to Johnny B. That this happened in 1943, the Zoot Suit riot. So this was really
June 3rd through the 8th.
Yeah, so it's a little bit earlier, several years earlier than this, and so I think he's just adding artistic license to this to make it more dramatic. That we had these, and I was reading, John, the Zoot Suits were supposed to be, it was Filipinos, Latinos, and Italians used to wear Zoot Suits. Now, I can't imagine you back in the day wearing a Zoot Suit, but I know you're styling, you like good clothes, you like to look good, and I just can't see you in a Zoot Suit though, man, dude. That's just me, right?
No, I can't do those baggy pants and the long jackets and the hats.
No, well, and the Zoot Suit things were, the Navy mostly, and these guys who hung out at clubs that dressed in Zoot Suits. Apparently, there was some riots back in 1943 involving these guys. It got out of hand, and it was inappropriate. I don't even remember who started it. I don't know if you guys read up on that, but it does kind of set the time frame. It does set the notion that, all is not well in LA at the time, right?
Yeah.
And this, they do say this is kind of set in World War II. So it's clearly several years before the murder in real life. I don't know how long it's supposed to be before. Yeah. Any comments on the zoot suit stuff there, Buzz?
Well, no, I mean it did happen, and it was, as I understood, it was mostly Mexican zoot suiters, and I don't know exactly how it started. I think a couple of cops went into a bar to arrest them, and they got jumped, and then a large squad of officers went in there and started enforcing order, and it got a little out of hand. I guess a lot of guys went to jail, and I guess I don't know if a couple cops got fired, but there was definitely some discipline on the police force.
Well, so one of the things I thought about this scene in relationship to LA Confidential is I felt that he's trying to, the writer, James Ellroy, is just like they did in LA Confidential, the Christmas massacre, the bloody fight that they had in the lockup. That's a true story. He blended that into the story of the movie, and he's doing the same thing here, because both of our officers end up in the zoot suit riots. Both of them end up in fights with some zoot suiters and others who are there, because I think they punched some soldiers too. So it wasn't like they were whoever was a problem, and both of them are former boxers, which we'll get into in a minute. But they linked the bloody massacre in the cell block and LA Confidential is very similar to this thing where they're linked and they're tied together. And in this case, instead of Stensland and LA Confidential getting fighter behind these guys actually get bonded and come together and end up becoming partners after this whole zoot suit thing. So I don't know if they both threw good right crosses and that's why they wanted to work together, but that's what I saw is it's the commonalities on the writer adding the scene and bringing our main characters together. What do you think, John?
Yeah, the zoot suit riots, originally what I read of, was a gambling debt at first with the Hispanics and the Navy. And the fight started, then LAPD came in and everybody got jumped. But that was the first day. After a lot of the Navy guys got their ass beat, the admiral in San Pedro told everybody to get out there and kick some ass, take some names. That's why it went on for 5 days. And LAPD had to finally send all the troops in to finally put it down. So one of the guys here that's watching this said it doesn't look like looks like it's pretty low on LA riots. Actually, it was pretty big back then.
Yeah.
But that back then, not everybody was shooting each other. They had stilettos, knives, and they were punching using bats and everything else. A lot different than it would be today.
Right. But it was interesting how the author blended this stuff together, and certainly the director was true to that. And that kind of brings up our next scene, which is charity boxing. So, John, you were a boxer, right?
Yeah.
Briefly, or where'd you box?
8 years.
8 years?
8 years. Mainly a sparring partner for some of the greats, but
really?
At lighter weights. But I looked up everything. This is a created event.
Right.
It never happened. Although we can look back at the Police and Fire Olympics. So when they brought in Fire and Ice for their different names, but the Police Fire Olympics, and our charity boxing matches that our department does with LAPD and with LA Fire, those are good boxing matches and they're all for charity. But back then, this is something that was just invented for the movie. Just to get them together and show how tough they were.
Yeah, and create a reason for these guys to come together. And I questioned we're going to wrap the department's future bond hearing behind two boxers, but I thought about the LAPD, the LA Sheriff charity matches. I forget what they raised money for. Was it Special Olympics or I don't know who they. But
a lot of different stuff. That and the local boxing rings to help endangered children.
Yeah, somebody asked me if I wanted to box. I said, "Nah, no way, man. You see this big nose here? I want to. Yeah, that would be a big target. I have no desire to box. Although I wish I had gotten into wrestling a little bit because that seems to be the way to win a fight. What do you think, Buzz? I thought Long Beach played in some of those charitable boxing tournaments. Do you remember anything like this?
Yeah, we had a couple guys. L.A. Arnwine was one of our boxers.
In your room.
And I don't know. My dad boxed a little in the Army, and he had 3 or 4 bouts, was all I know. And he said, well, those guys with the sloped shoulders, they really hit hard. So I figured it was somebody who was doing a lot of weightlifting. And my dad, I mean, when he got out of the service in 45, he was 6'3" and weighed like 140. So, after spending 3 years in the South Pacific, I'm sure he was a little bit heavier when he was boxing, but not by much.
Yeah, well, so he knows when I said the Japanese didn't take any prisoners, they really didn't. It was a tough. What battles did he fight in any particular battles, Buzz?
Well, he was a ranger. He did a lot of rubber boat landings behind Japanese lines. He got a Bronze Star for one battle they were in.
Wow!
But he was in New Guinea. Yeah. He was in the Philippines. He always told me his chief claim to fame was liberating the San Miguel Brewery in the Philippines.
Got to have that beer.
But yeah, he was in a lot of fights, and he saw some things since he was behind Japanese lines. A lot of the times he just hated the Japanese. I mean, he saw them grab babies from Filipinos through binoculars, grab babies from the Filipino women in villages that they were leaving and throw them up and catch them on their bayonets. So he hated Japanese until he was in Hawaii one time, and he's sitting next to a little Japanese guy who was in the 442nd, the Japanese battalion that was in Italy.
The Nisei division.
Yeah. And guy's name was Mac Tawada, and he started talking to him, and he said, well, I guess it was just their militaristic government that they had in Japan that caused these guys to be such bastards. So,
well, I think that with the whole thing is everybody was less than them, so it was easier to kill them. I think that's how.
Yeah, that's right. They were Japanese supremacists, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah, I like history. So the Tarawa campaign, that was
he was there.
One.
Yeah.
So certainly the Burma campaign and the Rangers that they sent in the forest there, I think it was. Yeah, and so I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the Pacific campaign. We tend to focus on the European campaign, but those guys that fought in the Pacific, and that just reinforces my point. These are the people this is the characters who are in the show. These are tough guys who've been through a lot in their life. And they take no guff, and they're not afraid of people, right? I mean, they've been through hell. I guess what's the movie Hell and Back? They've been through hell and back. So, So anyway,
Merrill's Marauders.
Merrill's Marauders. That's it. That's the one I remember.
The Rangers.
But yeah, I remember the LSD, LAPD boxing matches for charity. So it's not I wonder if the author had seen something like that, and so he just kind of included it. It gave him an interesting plot twist to bring these guys together.
Well, Elroy might have.
Yeah. So the next scene I want to talk about, this is the shooting scene. So these guys, they're becoming friends, they're hanging out, they're making arrests, they're talking about it, and they're part of the warrant squad, which they call them the warrant squad in the movie, but I always assumed this is probably some kind of variation of the gangster squad's Buzz. What do you think? Are you familiar with any warrant squad that existed, or was the warrant squad just part of the gangster squad?
Well, not on LAPD. I mean, we had a warrant squad in Long Beach, but no, I'm not at all familiar with any warrant squad. I kind of thought some of the elements kind of reminded me of the gangster squad, but not a whole lot. Just a few of the technical things that they did kind of.
Well, they did. they did intersect these guys with the mafias, because you see a little
Yeah.
bit later Cohen comes in, and so they are talking about gangsters and the criminal underworld. Even if you had guys that were lone actors, just like in New York, I imagine, and in Chicago, if you're a pretty good beanie guy or you're doing something, you're breaking and hitting jewelry stores. So,
Yeah.
many times those guys have to pay a piece of the pie to the local mafia underground, and so there is some inner, and at the time in LA, this was a much stronger thing. I don't think we really had that same kind of cohesiveness amongst organized crime in LA when I was doing policing, even when I first started. But back in the 40s and 50s, that would have existed, right? There would have been this network of criminals and a pecking order of criminals. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You had the Italian mob with the Dragnas, and you had the Jewish mobs with Cohen and Bugsy Siegel and those guys. But they also kind of intermingled a little bit too.
Yeah, they did.
They weren't really warring each other. Mickey Cohen was trying to corner the market on bookmaking, and so he got arrested for murder once, but got off because it was supposedly self-defense. Killing another, it was a bookmaker and his mom, I think. He killed the bookmaker, but I think his mom was really the bookmaker and he was helping her. But they were, there was organized crime, and you did have to, if you were a lone crook and they found out you had a big score, you had to pay your tax to the upper guys, to the more organized crime.
Yeah. I mean, why not? They're going to come and tax you. You can't go to the police and say, "Hey, I just boosted this place, and now I have to give 10% to
Yeah.
Mickey Cohen." I mean, who are you going to go to? The police? I guess you could have, if once it was
Yeah.
corrupt, and have them. But in the scene, these guys end up getting in a shooting, and the context comes later. What was actually going on here? They're deemed the warrant squad, and so doing surveillance and looking for bad guys seems appropriate. But there was something else going on in this movie when the shooting starts, and Lee, the main guy here, ends up shooting the bad guys, and Bucky, the other main character here, ends up catching one guy who takes a shot at him. Right, catches the black guy who runs away, and but Lee ends up shooting the female, a male, and then goes inside the place and kills other people. And we're going to get into corruption that comes up here, but that's really what's going on here. And in the 50s is when Parker came in. He came in, was it the late 40s, early 50s?
I think right around just 49 or 50.
Yeah. So we're still dealing with the LAPD that hasn't fully cleaned up its act yet. It's still dealing with the corruption. There's still there's still a holdover of that going on. Parker hadn't come in. Now my understanding is they started the Gangster Squad. Was it before Parker or after Parker?
No, it was before. It was right after World War II. Willie Burns, I think, started it. He went out to all the 77th Street, some of the divisions, and had a Tommy gun with him. Con Keeler, who was a friend of my grandfather's and my father's, was one of the original members, but Burns came out and said, we're going to go get the gangsters. We're not, they're going to try to take over LA, and had the Tommy gun for visual effects and showed these guys, these are what you're going to be carrying. And
God, I can't imagine doing that today. I mean, God, or even in the 80s when I started,
Yeah.
But my point is they want to get rid of the mob, and the mob is a corrupting influence. So the reform probably did predate Parker, but Parker just dealt with it more effectively. He integrated into the department and got rid of some of the old heads who were corrupt. So it was a process, right?
He
corruption.
was professionalizing the police department. So, he was, and there was, I mean, back then, just about every department in the country had their own corruption, and like in most places, where do you get your corruption? Where people think it's a victimless crime, like in vice and narcotics. You know, they figure
Right.
they're only hurting themselves. So that's where most corruption starts.
Right.
You know?
Right. But you know, when they do the shooting, and obviously the relevance of the shooting becomes later, but in the background you can see that there's something else going on, and that's the crime scene for Elizabeth Short. And we can go ahead and throw the picture of Elizabeth Short back up there before you start the scene, Martine. And it basically represents her body, and there she is again. And we go ahead and go into the scene and where she's at, and in the real life, it is a woman, you know, walking her stroller or whatever that finds the body, and they do show that, they depict that in the movie, and it is accurate from that point of view. And the thing that about her murder, which I think is having investigated murders that became or crimes that became something of a national interest, right, where it's on America's Most Wanted, and I can tell you what a pain it is. You can see why this would be a big deal, because the body was left there naked, posed, cut in half, and then some ghoulish cuts made to her face. Sensationalize this, but there are two things that make this challenging for me. First of all, when this gets out and the public knows about it, it overwhelms an investigation. I handled one case that was national. It was on the national news every night for a couple of weeks, and it was on America's Most Wanted a couple times. And we, you know, 99.9% of the leads that came in were just a waste of time. And we did eventually catch those folks. And I can imagine what's going on here. The media would be way interested. And here's the other part of this. You guys can both. This was a time when Pulitzer and those folks were still going on. There was a lot of yellow journalism, and it's kind of similar today with social media. They're just trying. One wants to get circulation over the other one. They're willing to sensationalize a case for the newspaper. They're willing to put whatever it takes in the newspaper to the one more piece of information to sell another newspaper about Elizabeth Short. And that became part of this drama, right? That these newspapers are competing for stories, and they're putting whatever they want, whatever they can, any remoteness to it being the truth. They'll put it in there even if they haven't confirmed it. That's part of this, right, Buzz? This was
Oh, yeah.
yellow journalism time. This was about getting circulation, and you know, that's how misinformation got out there. That's the pressure on when they said they had 750 people involved in this case, you know, 400 deputy sheriffs. I'm thinking, oh God, could you imagine the lack of quality of the investigation given the breadth of it? You know, because you're not sending seasoned investigators. You're sending, you know, when you have that many people involved, you're sending, hey, go knock on the door, John.
Yeah.
No offense, John, and see what's going on. You know, but you know what I mean? It's like now you're suddenly dealing with a lot of leads that probably are nothing, and it takes you away from the leads that you probably had at the time and maybe missed. And so media really builds these things up, and it can really complicate a case. What do you think, Buzz?
Oh, absolutely. And like in the movie, one of the detectives says, yeah, well, you know, we don't put that stuff out because you have to know, you have to keep some stuff back so you can eliminate the crazies who want to confess. And like you said, you know, you get all these officers, detectives and police officers taking notes and talking to people. Well, as you guys know, as supervisors, the quality of the officers, some officers do a really circumspect job, and other officers, you know, they're just going through the motions, doing what they have to do. So, you know, so you have to judge things by knowing your people and knowing and how are you going to do that? Like you said, with 700 people, you're never, you know, you're not going to know. You have to you can't filter all this stuff. It's just almost impossible.
Yeah, how do you collate all the leads? How do you do the linkage? How do you put one lead together with another lead? You have to use your brain. Somebody's got to read everything and make those connections, right? And when you have the more people you have involved, those connections are likely to fall through the cracks. And and to be quite frank, sometimes you waste really good investigators on nonsense leads, right? I mean, that does happen too, right? I mean, and a lot of this is just, John, a lot of this is ginned up about media just trying to get that latest headline.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's clicks, right, John? It's clicks, it's views on social media. But back then, it was selling, increasing your circulation, right? Competing with the competitor.
Absolutely.
And it was
the only time that I've actually seen it work, and it was because of a certain circumstances with the Night Stalker case that we handled, not me, Homicide handled, and Gil Carrillo and Frank Salerno, and they put out the stuff, and they had to fight to put the stuff out. But because this guy was a transient and you never knew where he was going to be, and the public interest was to get some of the information out with some of the drawings and pictures, and it actually led to him being caught. But most of the time, no. And if you do want to put something out, you give them the info. Don't give them all the info. You only give them certain tidbits. But that's the only time I've seen it work really well was the Night Stalker case. But if you look at, go ahead.
And but there's also incentive when you have cases like this and people have inside information. They leak it to the media because, you know what I mean? They want to feel like they're cool. They want to see their comments in the newspaper next day. So you have leaks as well, or people come forward with false information to get their 15 minutes of fame, right? Those are all things that happen, right?
Yeah. There's so many people that, they'll confess. In fact, one of our viewers said, I bet a lot of people confess to these. Yeah, you get a lot of wackos out there that, I'm going to get my 15 minutes of fame, and I'll confess falsely, but hey. In fact, one of them in that case was a stuntman at the studios.
Really?
He had a brain fart, and I don't know if he was on drugs, but he went and turned himself in as one of the killers, and turned out he had nothing whatsoever to do with it. But that happens. But in this movie, when they find the body, you see all the people around it. They really screwed that investigation up from the get-go. They put a 6-foot barrier up. 6 foot. Yeah. That should have been, block long in each direction, because they trampled all the evidence, if there was any evidence, shoe prints, whatever. Yeah. And then you've got everybody bent over there taking pictures. They let it get out of hand, and that's about what really happened.
But
and
a lot of the things you do in police work, there are some good reporters that an officer can trust, and he can say, hey, this is what we'd like to put out, and they'll put it out. We had a reporter at the Long Beach Press Telegram who was really great. She was a great gal, and we could give her information and she would put it out. And if her editors made her write something that we didn't like, she'd come and say, hey, the editor wanted me to put this in. I didn't want to put it in. But you could trust. There are certain reporters who do a good job, and and have some integrity, and you can trust them. So,
well, this one was sensationalized. I today I would look at this and it would be TMZ would be all over it, right? There ends up being some linkage to Hollywood and rich people and whatever, and they would be all over it. I mean, and there wouldn't really be any. Because here's how this is supposed to, I mean, you guys, I don't know if you guys have read All the President's Men. That was probably my first understanding that, okay, if you're credible journalism, your goal is to get a piece of information and corroborate that from another reliable source, and then you go with it. Unfortunately, you can have a bunch of credible information and only pick and choose the pieces they want to print to get the story they want, right? I mean, that does happen as well. But at least they try to be truthful. Back then, and I think to some degree today, it's really about just being first, and it's about being out there, and it's about defeating the competition, meaning all of the other providers. Because let's face it, we're kind of a news channel, right? We're going to talk about some stuff that goes on in the day. So people get their content from wherever they want, and that has pressed mainstream media to loosen up their ethics
and standards,
or just run away from them, so they can be first and they can sell most. And and this is what I always say, and you guys can concur.
Well, most of their reporting now is based on speculation and sensationalism. I mean, I think it's worse today. Well, because they have, you have the 24-hour news cycle. So,
Yeah.
and they keep trying to be first rather than to be correct. So,
Got to be able to say breaking news. But one of the things I say, and I remind people, and I think sometimes reporters cringe because they want, when I say it in front of them, because they want to feel like they are a professional, or hey, they're in the business of selling ad space.
yep.
That's it.
Yeah.
They're a business.
That's so true.
They're in the business of you picking up the newspaper in the old days, or clicking, because they measure clicks, they measure views. How long do you land on the page? How long do you stay there? That's what they're in the business of doing. And what did they say? Blood sells. If it bleeds, it leads, was the whole line. And so they have to, and this played out in this this played out in this murder case, right? This played out in it. It got so sensationalized, one, because of the circumstances behind it, but also because of, in my opinion, irresponsible media, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So let's go into the next scene, and it's the autopsy scene, and this is, I want to hopefully get a little bit into the, so she was, one of the key aspects of her death was that she was cut in half. And it appears to be that she was cut in half with somebody who had skill sets, knew how to do it in a particular way. I think they had a name for it back then. And some of the suspects who came forward, I know Buzz has one that we're going to talk about a little later, but where they might have some kind of medical training on how to do this. And the blood was allegedly drained from her. Some of her body parts were missing. But one of the other things is that she had this grotesque smile cut into her face. From her, it went from the corners of her lips to her ears, but it was really that it's the dissection that kind of limits the suspects, because I mean, you don't accidentally dissect somebody according to a mainstream medical procedure, right? That's usually done by somebody that has some skill set. So that's kind of an important thing for this movie, and which is, for me, also is disappointing at the end of the movie, because it doesn't lead to that, and at least not in my mind, unless I miss something in the movie. But that's a big part of this, right? And it's also a big part of why it's sensationalized and why it is selling newspapers, so to speak. So, John, what do you think? I mean, obviously it's a big clue, but
it had to be somebody that had some type of surgical experience. And I always thought it was just cut her in half, cut her boobs off, and disemboweled her. But I read it went farther than that. From the inside, cut all her sexual organs out also. That was pretty gruesome. So you had to be one sick puppy to be doing that stuff.
Well, and this is somebody that, as they say, how do they say, this is an organized serial killer? This is somebody who's probably done something similar, or at least fantasized about it, and has done other things, because you don't just wake up and do something like this, right, Buzz? It's you've done this before. Would you think this is somebody who's done this before?
Well, like you say, either he's done it before or he's fantasized about it. But this goes way beyond anything like that. This is somebody who's really sick, and I've written an article for the Long Beach Rap Sheet, the Police Officers Association magazine. I wrote a 3-part article, and I interviewed Con Keeler, who was still alive at the time I wrote the article, who worked this back in '49, and they thought that it was the guy had to have some type of medical knowledge, and but this was definitely a sick individual. We can get into that later, but
yeah, and I think it's, so let's talk about the Hollywood, how this. So I did look up. She worked when they got it back into her background, they recover. They managed to identify her. She worked at the Florentine Gardens on Hollywood Boulevard Now, John, I hadn't heard of that, but that place still exists now, and they do they, they they tend to focus more on Latino music, and it's still the same old building, looks like an old Art Deco building, and it existed back then. So she worked as a waitress there, and that's kind of to me that's the thing that connects her to Hollywood the most, because I couldn't really find any evidence that she actually did a screenplay or was in anything. But she was a good-looking waitress, which there are a lot of good-looking waitresses work in Hollywood, and she worked at the Florentine Club. I don't know if you've ever been there or not, but did you ever hear of it?
Years ago.
Was it was it a Latino place back when you went, or was it?
Yeah.
It was, okay, yeah. So I don't get the sense it was that back in the 40s. Buzz, do you have any information on the Florentine?
Yeah, I think it was more of like a dance club. It had a bar in it, but it was like you'd go in and they had girls there, and I don't know that Elizabeth Short was a waitress or one of the gals that you'd pay to dance with.
You buy tickets.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
What do they call it? Taxi dancers? What do they call them?
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah,
and whether it was also involved with prostitution going upstairs. I've kind of suspected that, but I don't know for sure that that's a fact. But I think that was kind of what it was too.
Well, one of the suspects, I mean, Hanson, I guess he owned the place. He was he was millionaire. Yeah. He owned the
Mark
place.
Hanson.
And they had lodging, I guess, either behind the place or above the place or somewhere there where she actually lived there for a while.
That was at his house. It was on Carlos.
Okay.
Yeah. He had rooms there that supposedly he'd rent out, but he also had parties at his house where a lot of the bigwigs in the entertainment industry and in the city and in the LAPD would go to have these parties, and he had all these young starlets or wannabe starlets there, and they were expected to be friendly to all the party goers. So
it's as we look at the connection and the writing in LA Confidential versus here, some similar themes, beautiful ladies, look like starlets, playing up to important guys. And I'm sure that plays into why it wasn't solved. If it was one of those guys, we can't, they're hiding information, but that theme does exist in both of these movies, right? The connection between Hollywood and powerful, beautiful women and powerful players. And I guess even today with Harvey Weinstein and his whole,
good connection.
Getting the rich and influential guys dirty, I guess, by sleeping with some of these guys, right?
Yeah. When you mix the power players with the young nubile starlets, things can happen, and I'm sure that there was hanky panky going on.
Yeah, we got a commenter saying that he thinks Dr. Hodel was likely, it just implies he was involved because he was connected to broader cult and yeah. We're gonna get into Dr. Hodel here in a little bit because he's one of the guys that we're going to focus on, just because an LAPD officer, his son, indicated he's a suspect. But yeah, there is a Hollywood circle, and part of the Hollywood circle is drawing in senior management of law enforcement, LAPD, sheriff, you name it, and compromising them. That's part of the corruption, right? You want to compromise them with ladies. And again, I there's some, whether she was selling herself or doing this, there's no real solid evidence that is actually true. It's certainly possible, but we haven't really seen. And I would have thought, given the 750 investigators, they would have had harder evidence to say, yeah, she was involved in prostitution. She was doing this and doing that. I don't know what you think about that, Buzz. I would have thought more would have come out about her background if she was doing that.
Yeah. Well, she never got arrested for that. She was arrested once or twice. I think when she was a juvenile and that came out in the movie. I think that she was arrested in Santa Barbara or someplace for underage drinking. But
like most kids.
Yeah.
I beg your pardon?
Like most kids.
We'd all be guilty of that. Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, and there's a theme that maybe her character has been unnecessarily drugged through the mud here because they don't have that. So, in your context, was there something more that came out about that, her behaviors leading up to this, that she was involved in the seedier side? Or
one of the reasons that Dylan, the guy my dad thought did it, was told the gangster squad was that one of the reasons she was killed, well, she had information about this gang that was robbing hotels up and down the coast, but she was also supposed to be a tease, which would countermand anything that she was if that was true, that she was a prostitute. So yeah, she was kind of a tease. She would flirt and then shut guys down. So that was one of the reasons for supposedly for the ferocity of her murder.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, I get, hey, she wants somebody to propose. She doesn't want to just sleep with. She wants a ring. She wants security, right? So yeah, you want me. I mean, she knew her value, I guess.
Well,
and
in an interview, Elroy, the writer of the book, he admitted, he said there was no evidence of any prostitution or porn, although he put it in the movie.
Yeah.
That she was filming a porn movie.
Yeah.
He's none evidence. He put it in there just because it's Hollywood and they had to put something in there.
Yeah.
And there's no evidence whatsoever that she did that. And like you said, 750 investigators, you would have think that it had something more concrete.
Yeah.
But Elroy said, no, it's all fictitious. He admitted that the porn movie and promiscuity was invented for the book.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's probably where he takes a lot of artistic license and deviates greatly from the facts. And I appreciate you finding that interview, John, because, one of the, go ahead, Buzz.
It's a novel, I mean, so, there's been more than a few novels about it. Yeah. What True Confessions was one, a book I really liked. I mean, it had some really funny stuff in it about the Catholic Church that the chief and I were brought up in. I went to 12 years of Catholic school too. So
but I hated the movie.
You hated True Confessions?
Yeah, boring.
Well,
took forever to get to the point.
The book was a whole lot better. I liked the movie, but I thought the book was a whole lot better. I mean, he had scenes where the priest that De Niro played, he's investigating these priest things, and there's supposed to be a priest out in the valley who, when he's consecrating the host, pulls it up and starts singing "When Johnny Goes Marching Home Again." Hello, I mean, just goofy things that supposedly happened. But the book was and the book was actually closer to the actual murder case than some of the other.
Yeah.
books.
Well, I understand what Elroy's doing here. He's trying to sell books. It's just in terms of Elizabeth Short, who is, she got nothing out of this. Her family got nothing out of this. I mean, so everybody's getting rich off her story. And, we can at least dispel, based upon experience of 3 police officers, if the evidence isn't there, that's probably not the truth, right? So she probably wasn't a prostitute. She probably wasn't doing this stuff. No. She likely was a good-looking gal who knew her value and just wanted some rich guy to put a ring on the finger and take care of her. That's why she was a tease, but didn't really give it up because she didn't want, you know what I mean? Those are all things. That's the way I kind of
hoping to make it big in the movies, but she wasn't putting it out.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's important to say that. And but let's bring in the next scene. The next scene is, I include this scene just because I really wanted to talk about the neon art, and the scene is neon art. And if you you see Bucky is he's doing his own investigation. I don't know why him and Lee are not doing this stuff together, but they're splitting up and they're doing this stuff. And but John, you worked Universal City Walk, right?
Oh yeah.
Where they had a lot of this neon art, and I saw this neon art, and it just reminded me, so Universal Studios opened up City Walk. City Walk had all of this neon art. It was put up there by the Museum of Neon Art, and they preserved a lot of this stuff. And you would see this stuff throughout Universal City Walk, and some of these things I had seen there, but I really liked it because that was the sign of the day, right? That was the thing that drew people's attention to your shop. That's what brought you in. It added context to the time. And I think neon art is just cool stuff, right? But you remember the neon. So I remember this one distinctly from Universal City, the lady with the cigarette and the top hat. Do you remember some of this neon art, John?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And they portrayed that as the Frolic Room.
Yeah.
Down on Hollywood Boulevard, and it's still there.
Did the Frolic Room have the big neon like that?
And not anymore.
Not anymore.
That I know of.
It did back in the day, maybe.
They did, and they had a sign outside. God, back in the 80s, but I don't know if it does anymore. I haven't been there in decades. But it also wasn't I don't know about in the 1940s, but when we went there, it wasn't a gay bar.
Oh, is it a gay bar now? Is that what it is?
Well, that's what they're portraying.
Oh, it's a lesbian bar,
yeah. Yeah, so I don't know if it was or not.
Yeah. Well,
we went in there.
Well, the Frolic Room. Yeah, I'm glad I brought you on, John. If I had any questions about bars, I knew you could probably handle it. So you got the flirt. Was it the garden right? Now you got the Frolic Room you're talking about, and so Buzz, what'd you think of the neon art? Kind of cool stuff. I mean, I like.
Oh yeah, I like that. I like the neon signs and the Art Deco stuff of that era. I think was really neat. I wish they'd go back to it.
There's the old building, and John and I used to chase people, homeless people through that. It's on Sunset. I think it's called the Sunset Hotel now, or it used to be. Remember, John? You know what? It was abandoned, and it was. I want to say it was like 10 stories, maybe 13.
It was
stories.
bigger than that. It was 14 or 15 stories.
And we had to chase bums out of there. The backside it was DeLong Prairie Avenue. The front side was Sunset. I think it became the Argyle Hotel now. They reconditioned it. And it Buzz, if you haven't been there, next time you're in town to visit your grandson's football games, spend a night at, I think it's called the Sunset Hotel, right on the Sunset Strip. It's an old Art Deco building. It used to be an apartment building, and Clark Gable used to have an apartment there. So if you go there, you'll see it, and you'll know right away what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to stay there, they have a nice pool bar. I took my sister when she came down there. I said, "You want to go see some old Hollywood? Let me take you into this building." But we used to chase bums out of that place, and then somebody bought it, reconditioned it. Now it's
they redid the whole thing.
Beautiful hotel. But so the neon art, the Art Deco, the streamlined modern, that's the construction of that era. And,
I love that.
I just love that whole look. I mean, it went with the cars. Even the cars were kind of that way at that time. But it's beautiful, and neon art. I think neon's presses gas now, so we don't have that much anymore. But it was the hey, come to my club kind of sign back then, right?
Yeah. There's a place I've got to go here in Vegas is the graveyard, the neon graveyard. I haven't been there yet. And when my kids come back out, I'm going to take them because they've preserved all the old signs from the 40s, the 50s, when the Golden Nugget, all that stuff. I haven't seen it, so I don't know if it's.
Well, next time in Vegas.
But I want to go look.
Is it in Vegas?
In Vegas, you can take me there, John.
Yeah, it's a neon graveyard.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll have to go there too, because I always liked when I was working Universal City, doing the City Walk and seeing the neon art. I always it set that place apart in comparison to anything else. And
it has all the old signs. I just haven't been there. I've got to go. It's supposed to be really nice.
Okay, well then obviously Bucky is doing his thing, and Lee, they're both doing their separate investigations. I imagine it's. One of the things I noticed about Lee, he in the movie and they show it, he's getting obsessed with the case, right? and this is also, and you will see it in another scene. But Lee, he saved Scarlett Johansson, her character, from a bad guy, right? We see in the movie that she actually was carved up by the guy. His initial was carved in him. And this reminded me of the Bud White of LA Confidential, right?
Yeah.
This need to protect women, this overpowering need. So it seems to be a theme in Elroy's books, right? I mean, I don't know. I haven't read all of them, but this need to protect women or people who are weaker than you, which that is kind of a bygone era kind of feeling. I mean, it's probably still strong in the three of us, but it was much stronger then, right?
Do you know Elroy's history?
I don't.
His mother, well, I think when he was 10 or 11 years old, she was a single mother, went out on a date and never came back, and they found her body a couple of days later. So, that would probably be the impetus for.
Yeah, absolutely. He wanted to find that person really bad.
Yeah.
In fact, that's transformed into, if you've ever watched the Bosch TV show.
Oh, yeah.
Bosch. That's exactly what Bosch went through.
Yeah.
His mom was found in a dumpster after a date.
Yeah.
Dead, of course. And he ended up going into juvenile hall. But
this show is Pop Culture Minefield, and it just thinks so. Here it is, real life, as inspired culture, the books that inspired the movies, and thanks for sharing that. I didn't know that about the writer, but you can see it obviously an emotional thing that has driven his writing. But actually, the linkage between LA Confidential, this Bud White's need to protect women. Now we got Lee and Bucky's overpowering need to protect women, vulnerable women.
Yeah.
It does show that women can be manipulative, both movies too, which is that's kind of the soft, it's kind of soft power, right, that women have versus the masculine power that men have. So let me do a quick commercial break here. I just want to tell everybody, hey, you can catch me every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Pop Culture Minefield on YouTube, but we are also on Rumble. So if you don't like YouTube because I got all these violations and rules and things like this, you can follow us on Rumble, and we're trying to build that channel. It's Rumble Pop Culture Minefield. If you go over to Rumble, be sure to follow us, like the show, comment, and share with a friend. If you're watching us on YouTube, do the same thing. Be sure to like the show, make a comment, share with a friend. And on YouTube, you subscribe on YouTube. Now, one of the reasons why I really need you to do that on YouTube is, we've been told we're getting some strikes, and we haven't quite figured out why we're getting strikes. It might be because we're showing guns in these scenes, or it might be just because some of the subject material that's in the scenes, or some of my other counterparts use colorful language, which might upset them as well. We don't tend to use that on this show, but what I really need you to help us out, if you're watching the show, whether you're watching it live or you watch it later on, do me a favor, like the show and make a comment and share with a friend, so that we can build our audience and we can go past these this quiet suppression of the channel and this show to build our audience. And I will say, since I started here, the channel has gradually grown from, I want to say it was like 5,900 to, I think we're at 7,200 people that are subscribers. And my show generally gets somewhere between 250 to 500 people in the course of a week who watch Morning Coffee with the Chief on Pop Culture Minefield, both between Rumble and YouTube. So do me a favor, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. If you're watching us on Rumble, make sure you follow us there. Always like the show, make a comment, and share with a friend, so we can build our audience and we can get past these censors and the people who don't like our content. I was telling John, you left, so I would say sometimes one of the reasons why we get cut off sometimes is because of colorful language, but that's, believe it or not, that's not really my show. That's some of the other hosts who get a little more colorful about their language. So anyways, so that's
I refrained from the F-bomb today. So
I noticed that. I mean, they challenged me. They said, we're going to catch you saying the F word. I said, you won't catch me saying the F word. It's very, very rare, and I probably would never say it on air. So let's go to the next show. So Bucky is doing his exploration, and he meets Hilary Swank, who I think plays a really good character in here. I mean, I didn't like where the plot led, but I actually liked her character, and I like her as an actress. I think she does a really good job. She was in $1 Million Baby, I think.
Oh yeah, she was great in that.
She did Boys Don't Cry, which I wouldn't say I necessarily liked the movie, but I thought she did a pretty good acting gig on that one.
Oh, hell of an actress. That was a terrible movie.
And she's really good in this one, and so I liked her. So he's following up leads on what is going on. So thanks, Jordan. You all should do more of these unsolved. It was fun. So, lady, thank you for being with us. Remember to like the show and share it with a friend, and come back and watch the rest of it when you can. But she does a great job in the show. I really like her. She plays this aloof, kind of really rich person, and we've interacted with rich people who kind of look down on us blue collar earth people, right? People who are well beneath us, and she does that pretty good with him. But he also is, strong, masculine, sexy guy, and so she wants to play around, right? But he goes to the Frolic Hub. He finds out that the Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Short, had some relationship with this woman because they looked alike, I guess. That's why. Yeah. And they wanted to see each other. And that's how he got to this connection. And that's how he ends up getting to who ends up being the murderer. So first of all, what did you think of Hilary Swank there, John? And this connection and how he got to her as connected to Elizabeth Short?
Well, she's a hell of an actress. It was a good plot to the movie, and she plays it to the hilt with the you don't know whether she's good or bad until the very end, and you can see if it really occurred, which it didn't, but if it did, you can see Elizabeth Short and her looking alike, dressing alike, doing the same types of things. Plus, she was playing a rich person. Elizabeth Short's not a rich person.
No.
And so she's one of those privileged people that wants to get down in the muck with the lower class and, play around and drink and carouse and everything else. So I thought it was a good plot twist, and she's a hell of an actress.
So she was slumming it, right? Is what they would say.
Word. I couldn't think of
slumming it. It was what they would used to say in the day, and all, the rest of us were all playthings. What'd you think, Buzz?
Well, I have to tell you, watching that scene, I kept focusing on Bucky wearing his hat while he's making out with this gal. I'm wondering, take off the hat, dude.
Absolutely right.
She's a great actress and he's a good actor, but I thought maybe the director should have said something like, okay, halfway through, take your hat and throw it out a hat rack or something. Like in this scene you're showing now, the hat on the hat rack,
Yeah, maybe they didn't have a hat rack and props there, so they just had to kind of ad lib. But I will say Hilary Swank, she does play a lot of the kind of girl next door kind of characters. At least that's how I don't think I've ever seen her in a sexy role like this one.
Yeah. And
I think she did, of all of them, I think she did very well. I mean, I actually liked the actors in this. I just didn't like the plot line. I thought was not as good, right? I think everybody did a pretty good job as actors.
Yeah.
It's just I think the writing just wasn't there, and
it's not nor the direction. And if you look at this movie, this is a low budget movie compared to LA Confidential. You gave it a C+. That was being nice. The actors and actresses are great, and they've done other stuff that they're phenomenal in. But when you have a bad director, bad plot lines, bad writing, it was
can't save the movie.
Low budget.
Yeah.
It could have been a lot better movie, right?
Oh, 100 times.
Yeah, it could have. It could have been a lot better movie. I mean, just a few tweaks in the writing here and there, and the director should have had some rewrites, or I guess, and done some more. But it had. I looked at it as a movie that had great potential and just didn't meet it.
Yeah,
No,
I
you're
think
absolutely right.
the critic said much anticipated movie after L.A. Confidential, and then it was a disappointment. So maybe
Yeah.
we had a blockbuster. Let's cash in on a follow up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
who cares how good it is, right? And
Yeah.
that's what it seemed like. And but Hilary Swank. I mean, in both movies, Paris Patchett was the wealthy guy who kind of slummed it a little bit in L.A. Confidential, and a bunch of them were like that. I mean, the DA was a powerful guy, kind of sleeping with the male prostitute actor, and so so that same kind of theme jumped in this movie, and maybe that's probably Elroy, maybe did he? I don't know if he grew up blue collar. Maybe that's part of this, right?
Oh yeah.
He grew up blue collar like the rest of us, or he was working class like the rest of us, and and then
Well, I
you
think he
see.
went through the system. Probably had homes he was sent to live with a family that would get paid to support him. I don't know for sure, but I think he was lower than blue collar. I mean, he was a kid of the system. So
He was struggling. Well, let's go to the next scene. This is the porn scene, which you guys brought up, and it starts to bring together who the bad guys are. And this is so they find out that perhaps that Bucky finds out that she was supposed to be in some kind of movie, and they find out that this movie is two women having sex on film, kind of I guess we would call it a stag film back in the day, right? That's what they're making here.
yeah.
And the question is this the reason for the murder? Probably not, but it probably brought, as we find out, it brought Elizabeth Short to the attention of who would ultimately be her killer, right? And but I think one of the things, it's when Lee reacts as he's watching this thing that that's the Bud White scene, right? Where Bud crunches the chair leg, and and he runs out of the building, and and he's angry, or what's it, the guy that's slapping his wife, and remember that scene, the guy slapping his wife in Christmas, and he calls him outside and he beats the guy up for hitting his wife. And I think Bud his thing was his mom used to get beat, so that was a big thing in LA Confidential.
Yeah.
But you see this here where Lee reacts to this to them showing, and for me, it was really interesting. Okay, the chief is there to see the porn movie. Really, the DA is there to see the porn movie.
Yeah.
What? the chief of detectives is there to see the porn movie. I mean, what is this? I wouldn't invite all these people to an evidence or thing. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But okay, so let's comment on Lee's reaction to this. Clearly, it's related to Elroy's upbringing and his need to protect women, but also related to LA Confidential. What do you think, Buzz?
Well, yeah, it was similar to LA Confidential, but of course they didn't. In LA Confidential, they didn't really have a porn scene. As far as getting the chief and the DA, depending on the chief or the DA, it might have been that's what they wanted to see. They heard that they had this film, and they go, yeah, we better be there to give our expertise on it.
Well, and this is where they really go off the rails on the character of, although she's appears to be a reluctant participant in the film, attacking the character of Elizabeth Short. So did your dad's or any of his partners say anything about her character, Buzz? I know we could talk about a suspect a little bit, but did they really talk about Elizabeth herself?
Well, in addition to her, I think some of the one of the investigators, she was arrested once for shoplifting or something like that too, in real life. But no, they never really had anything about her her character. Obviously, it was a sexual murder, but her past never really had anything. She had boyfriends. She had supposedly she was going with some guy who was a captain in the army, and she in that period during the war and right after the war, there Um, I think she worked at a PX during the war. But never known. There was never anything about her in stag films or and that really wasn't the focus of the investigation that the Gangster Squad got involved in. So no, I don't know anything about that. I never heard anything about that, one way or another.
John, people who do come to Hollywood many times find themselves on the seedier side of Hollywood, as portrayed in the film, although it doesn't appear to be true. So that's a reality. So at least the author and the people who wrote for the movie, that's realistic, but it's maybe not this story, right?
Right.
So, well, let's go on to the next scene, and this is Fire and Ice. So Lee has had his meltdown, and he gets scolded, right? And they end up having an argument and a fight, both him and Bucky, and it's because Lee is kind of going in a different direction here, and I don't know if this is the right scene, Fire Ice, but so he's following his old trade. He realizes that Bucky's got some information, and what we find out is he goes to Hilary Swank's family's house, or her character's family, and he extorts them for money, right? That's one of the things he does. And it's also that we'll find out in a little bit that he also took some money from the former boyfriend from Johansson's former boyfriend in the movie, and that he actually is corrupt, which would have been fit with the time, right? We're still dealing with corruption on LAPD, and this is kind of where they kind of break up. But during this, Lee takes care of the bad guy who Scarlett Johansson was afraid of. He got out of prison, and Lee takes care of him with a silencer, but also he is targeted by somebody else. And that somebody else turns out to be the killer, and also it involves Hilary Swank. So he is killed. Lee is killed in this scene, and shortly after the scene is this is when the mobsters come in. So it appears like they know about it. This is where it the whole plot goes off the rails for me.
Yeah.
These two guys are killed. Suddenly, Mickey Cohen's people show up, and because Mickey Cohen is somewhat connected with the mobster who got out of jail, but they're going to just get rid of all the bodies, and they got the one cop there. They decide not to kill Bucky. They're just going to explain to him this is the best way to go. I mean, I kind of had a problem with this scene.
Yeah.
And this is where it really went off the rails. And what do you think, Buzz?
Yeah, no, it was like a left turn to nowhere. I mean, it didn't go along with the rest of the movie. It seemed like at all. It just, and I don't mind surprise endings a lot of times, but this, didn't make any sense to me at all.
No, it didn't. And then, I mean, come on, this is your partner. This is somebody that you're going to you're going to avenge, and you're going to let them slide him in a fire and burn him, and nobody ever finds him again.
Yeah. No.
John, what did you think of the scene? This is where the plot line kind of got messed up,
Hokey.
Yeah.
When they came in, I was like, well, I had seen this movie a couple of years back, and I forgot it. And then I'm looking at this going, no. It was hokey.
Yeah,
poor writing, poor directing. The whole thought process on this film sucked.
It was just totally unrealistic. Like you say, your partner's dead. You're gonna, okay, yeah, I'll walk away from this. I understand.
Yeah,
you wouldn't
exactly.
understand.
Yeah, I mean, they could have. I mean, they didn't have to do the whole getting rid of the body thing. None of that made sense to me. But it did indicate that Lee was there was something else going on with Lee. I mean, why wouldn't you just throw a case on the guy that gets out of prison? Why kill him? Just violate him for parole, right? Why do you kill him unless there's something else going on? And we find out later there is something else going on, and that's where the issue of corruption comes up, and we find out that Lee probably took money. So this guy that was was released on parole, who had been beating up Scarlett Johansson, had done, I think, a bank robbery is what it was, or armored car robbery. Can't remember what he did. And when he put him away, he took his money, right? And then when he did the shooting, this was the shooting that we saw. That was Lee waiting for somebody to show up so that he can rip them off. And Bucky didn't quite understand that. I don't know how long it take. He must have picked a guy who'd been punched in the head so many times he couldn't see straight. Because I think I'd have picked that one up right away.
Yeah.
This was so he goes in and everybody's dead. Nobody surrenders. Everybody dies, and of course the money's gone. Whatever, So it didn't make again. A plot twist doesn't. I mean, I know they want to get corruption in there. They want to somehow. I think they just could have done a better job of that whole storyline.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think, Buzz? I mean, again, doesn't make sense, right?
No. There's so many inconsistencies with and totally outside of reality as we as law enforcement know it, but just as I think most movie watchers would see that and go, hey, what's up?
I think when I was reading so Rotten Tomatoes does the reviews, right? I don't know if you guys have seen that. And LA Confidential, I think, got 100%. I think this one got 37. So in my grading system, it probably would have been a D. If I went with Rotten Tomatoes, my C+ is just because I like the scenery. I thought the actors
and actresses
did a good job. Beautiful ladies and. But John, again, I mean, the corruption's in there. The shooting scene didn't really make a lot of sense to me. They could have done a little more, other than Lee was living in a really nice place. It indicated from the very beginning, okay, where does he get his money? They could have built that up a little bit more, made that a little more evident, right? And they did, and so that it's not just dropped on you. The plot, it just doesn't drop on you, right? And I think LA Confidential, they did that a little more. They did that a little better, right? I mean, if you think of Vincennes, right? Vincennes was, he's selling information to that version of the TMZ. He's a little bit corrupted, and they kind of lay that out, right? And they suggest all those things a little more, I don't know, probably crafty. They were a lot more crafty in how they suggested all that stuff. And hey, Andy, thanks for joining us. Remember to like the show, guy. And so I just didn't think they did that because it was just a surprise, right? And even the splitting of the characters, because basically Lee goes in one direction and Bucky goes in another direction. That didn't make sense to me too, and it kind of pulled away. I don't know. What do you think, John?
Well, I agree, 100%. And FYI, we only got a half hour left. I don't know if you want to hit the end of the movie or go on to information that we have.
Yeah, I got a couple more scenes, and then we'll jump into it. But anyways, he does find money in the house. It clearly indicates that Lee is corrupt, and that he's been living the high life in this corruption, and he's doing some work in which again. We would be hiring people to do that these days, but you did everything back then, right? You did your own work because you didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
But he's in there doing some work, and he finds the money, and he asks her, and she said, "I didn't know where he kept the money." So she kind of knew.
Yep.
She knew what the game was, and she never told Bucky. But again, how many punches did you take to the head? You didn't realize this, right? Yeah. Of course it's going on, right? And so, hey, when Martine, just right after the scene, roll right into the murder scene because we're going to talk about the corruption, and then we need to talk about the murder scene, and this is when they find out who did it. So Bucky realized Lee is corrupt. He's starting to put together that Lee used the information in this case to get more money. Because I imagine when you live the lifestyle, after you burn through your first or second score, you got to keep getting another score. And what this rich family represented to Lee was an opportunity because they're somehow connected to the Black Dahlia movie. Whether they really are or not, he saw the opportunity to make some money off them, and he extorted them, which caused him to be murdered, right? But in the end, both of these guys were right. They were going to the right suspects, and this family was involved. I don't know how much they all knew about this, but they, Lee and Bucky were both going to the same family, right? That's where they end up. And in Bucky, as he finds more information, he realizes that this family is deeply involved, and he knows that they have some relationship to a housing development that's supposed to be built under the Hollywood sign. And it was interesting how they brought that in. I didn't check to see what year that was to see if that actually matched or not. And so he goes there and he starts searching around, and he finds the scene that they filmed the porn film in, and he starts checking out, and then he finds what I call the murder scene, right? He found that murder scene, and he recognized this is where it happened. And he's remembering what the coroner said in the autopsy. And I will tell you the story. I went to one autopsy in the academy, and I decided I'm not going to homicide bureau because I don't want to go to autopsies. They were cutting some guys, they were cutting the top of his head off, and they were peeling back the skin. And he was some big Mexican gangster guy. And I'm like, oh my God, the guys have to watch this? I made the decision I was not going to work homicide because I had no desire to see that on a regular basis, right? So, but at the autopsy, he's replaying what the guy said in the autopsy. The body was wiped clean, and he's realizing that he found where Short was actually killed, and that is connected to the family of Hilary Swank's family, and that they're probably involved, right? That's what he finds out. And he eventually confronts them, but this is so talk about the murder scene, John. What do you think? I didn't do the historical thing on. Was that actually relevant at the time? Was the housing built at the time? Was it being built? But they tied Hollywood into it again via that, right? The rich family in again.
And they had the family member that was disfigured that they put in as, and then the mother who's an alcoholic and wacky, and then where they end up killing her supposedly. It just they did the smile on her face, carved into her face while she was alive, but the whole thing was just conjecture, unknown. So
but this is Elroy. He's doing the same thing again. He's linking in some historical stuff. I mean, the building of the subdivision below the Hollywood sign,
right?
Yeah, into the movie, and then that becomes his murder scene, Buzz.
Yeah.
So, what do you think of the context? I thought this was just really sloppy, but the guy did at least find the murder scene. I don't think there's a river that flows through there too. I go, a river in an arid place. I go, I don't know.
I really lost interest by this time in the movie from what I know actually happened. The murder scene was nowhere near there from what I understand. The housing made sense to me because it's right after the war. A lot of the soldiers and sailors who returned from the Pacific saw LA, and some of them had trained in Southern California, the Marine Corps and stuff. And they saw, the weather. They didn't have to go back to, 8-foot snow drifts and stuff. And so there were a lot of them were moving out here. So there was a whole bunch of housing going on for the next 10 years in Southern California.
Huge.
So that made sense to me, but the rest of it was just, didn't make sense to me. And
okay, well, I think the next thing, rich people, is really what. So I think again, Hollywood and rich people. This family had some kind of linkages to Hollywood. But I can't help but think, you just think of the Natalie Wood murder. I mean, the people who are really rich or famous, they're dealt with a little differently on these things. And, in some ways I can understand. If I'm a DA, I want to bring, a solid case. I mean, the whole case involving Natalie Wood, Robert Wood, Christopher Walken, they keep opening and closing, but it's similar, right? I think Randolph Hearst had something where somebody died, theoretically died when he was out yachting or something like that. So
Yeah.
we treat celebrities a little differently. To some degree, it might be because they have power, but I think partly it's because when we really sink our teeth into a case, it's because we want to win that case and we don't want to lose it, right? And we have to overcome their star power. John, what do you think? I mean, it's something that is part of this, right? We have to have a
Yeah,
solid case against rich people because they have resources to fight, right?
yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Power and money. And it's like a little off track from this, but you remember all the, we're both Catholic, and the child abuse in the Catholic Church, and the movement of priests that were abusers. Cardinal Mahoney was brought in by LAPD and interviewed. They could have filed on him for obstruction and several other things, but because of the cardinal and the powerful Catholic Church and the money involved, and they're building the new cathedral at that time down in LA, everybody kind of, well, okay, he should have gone to jail.
Right.
My own personal opinion.
Mine
But and I'm Catholic, but what they were doing was wrong. So, but a lot of times power and money gets involved and things don't go the way they're supposed to go.
Yeah, Buzz, you feel the same way, power and money, but also the realization that you got to have a good, solid case if you're taking on somebody like that.
Oh yeah, I mean more so than your average, street murder or anything else. Because it's going to be scrutinized by the media and by your superiors. So yeah, you got to get a bang up, dead, closed case. Get all your ducks in a row before you take it to the DA. And the DA is going to be even more critical before he files. He's gonna make sure everything is.
No, that's huge.
Yeah.
They were afraid to file on Mahoney.
Yeah.
Because believe me, he would have had every top lawyer in the country there, and they would have hammered everybody, and it would have been so convoluted and bad press for everybody. And the DAs, let's face it, and people don't understand this, but a DA, when he says he has 95 or 98% conviction rate, it's because when a station or a department, let's say West Hollywood, we get 48,000 reports. Out of that, 5,000 of them, you've got suspects. And you file on them. Some you don't file. Maybe you file 3,000 because there's not enough there to file. You file those 3,000 cases. The DA looks at it and goes, I can win that one. Boom, boom. Oh, this one, I just don't think I'm going to be able. So then they cut it down. You actually only end up filing 500 cases.
Yeah.
And out of that 500, they win 95%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and most people don't know that you have to really work hard to get into jail. I mean, and people have money and resources. It's even harder to get them to jail. So I understand, and so I guess we need to wrap up the plot here. So so he finds the location, he confronts the family, and it ends up being that the drunk mom with the gardener kills Elizabeth Short in the abandoned homes, right? That's I mean, it's almost like a Clue thing. That's how bad this one is, right?
Yeah.
And the gardener apparently has a relationship with the mom, somehow got his face cut, which is the relationship. But he apparently, I would think, based upon the plot to this, but it doesn't really lay it out, it sounds like he probably had an attraction to Hilary Swank, saw this gal who looked a lot like Hilary Swank, the look-alike, wanted to be with her. Daddy lines that up so that the gardener can be with her, but mom's mad because mom has a relationship with the gardener and ends up killing Elizabeth Short. I mean, this is the plot line, right? And it all kind of explodes right at the end. There's really no indication what's going on, right? And so they kill her, and then of course, as they get closer and Lee gets closer and Lee is blackmailing the family, Hilary Swank decides to kill Lee with the gardener, with the garrote, on the plateau, wherever that, on the balcony. And Bucky figures this out. And this is where it kind of goes off the rails. All this, I mean, well, it went off the rails a long time ago. And And of course, she thinks, well, hey, you don't want to kill me. You just want to sleep with me.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there might be some guys who go along with that. But
Yeah, there might be.
but I mean, so it's really bad. And so, and of course, he ends up killing Hilary Swank in the final scene where she killed Lee and he kills her. But yeah, let's get into the real suspects here. So I wanted to bring up, obviously I mentioned Hansen, who was the boyfriend of her, or wanted to be the boyfriend and was her boss at some time, was a suspect, and they had a lot of suspects, but there really were two that have really come to light. And the big thing was what we talked about earlier, is that the medical knowledge, how to do that bisection, the way it was done. It was said to be done consistent with the procedure that was typical of that era. And so one of the suspects is Dr. George Hodel, right? And if we got his picture there, Martine, let's throw him up there. And his son ended up joining LAPD, and his son was a homicide detective. And his son later wrote a book that says Hodel was
his dad was the murderer,
and that he was actually a serial killer, and he actually committed incest on his daughter, which he was arrested and charged for, but not convicted of. And some of my research showed that he was into bondage. So yeah, he would probably be a good suspect as far as I'm concerned. So did you get a chance to read Hodel's book? Did you get a chance to review his information, Buzz? And what do you think of that?
Yeah, I did years ago, but the only connection, I think Hodel said he looked at the handwriting of one of the notes or something, and that was his dad's handwriting. But there's really no other connection between him and Elizabeth Short.
Actually, there is.
Well, what is it?
Well, I'll tell you, when I was doing my research, Detective Hodel went to Elroy, the writer, and told him, I believe my dad's. And Elroy was very skeptical. He says, he thought Hodel was just trying to sell a book or trying to get his 15 minutes of fame, until in the late 1980s. Remember Steve Cooley was the DA?
Yeah.
Cooley gave the whole file to Elroy. It hadn't been open in like 40 years.
Yeah.
And Elroy was surprised to see that Hodel was listed as one of the suspects.
Oh.
And that really blew him away. But it wasn't just that Hodel raped his daughter, which is Hodel's sister. Detective Hodel was married.
Yeah.
His wife used to date his dad, Dr. Hodel.
Oh, that's odd.
And that was in interviews and everything else. And Hodel admitted to dating Elizabeth Short. And I believe the place we were talking about earlier, Gardens of Allah, what was it?
No.
Hey, hold on a minute. I got to get my charger for my laptop.
The Florentine Gardens?
Florentine Gardens.
Florentine Gardens.
I forget all the names. That may have been where they met, because a lot of the people that went there were people with money and distinction, doctors, lawyers, politicians, chiefs of police, blah, blah, blah. But he admitted to dating her a couple of times.
Well, if he was into bondage, then he would have been looking for people who wanted to play that way. And we've seen a lot of serial killers. They start out with bondage and they progress to really bad stuff. I mean, where they're doing violence and they want to experience. I did have a comment from somebody from our deleted scenes, and they made a great comment, which I thought was great. Because when your partner gets killed, you're supposed to do something about it. Sam Spade, Humphrey Bogart, the Maltese Falcon. Yeah, that's right. His partner gets killed in that movie, and he does something about it. So thanks for that. And that's funny. A lot of our movies, they do have a throwback to some other theme for some other movie, and it seems like a lot of these writers watch movies and you'll find similarities. I guess we're probably going to have a lot of that with AI, right? When they start doing AI writing, they're going to be linking old stuff with new stuff. But yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because Hodel does sound like a really despicable guy.
Yeah.
But the mere again, we go back to how many people investigated him, and yet the links are somewhat tenuous, right?
Yeah.
As to him being the killer. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, there was also a vested interest for writing the book to make some money, right? I mean
True.
that's there too. So we do have some connection, but it doesn't really make him any more of a suspect than anybody else at this time, right? And
Yeah.
True.
so
Not until 40 years later,
But
right.
20 years later, I have more information that, Hodel fathered kids. There's another TV show miniseries that you may want to look at called I Am the Night, with Chris Pine as a reporter, a World War II guy, reporter. And it starts off very slow, but basically he meets Hodel's estranged daughter from the Philippines and does all this investigation and everything else. But it was proved that he was in the Philippines in the 60s.
wow.
And there was a murder, Black Dahlia style, in 1967 when Hodel was in the Philippines. She was found dismembered on May 28, 1967. Almost the exact same type of body. He was a suspect, but of course,
Didn't
no
go
other
anywhere.
info. But if you start putting things together, he was such a sick bastard. Pardon my language.
I think
What
little I found out again, but
yeah.
let's get to Buzz's. So Buzz,
Go ahead, Buzz.
let's clarify. So your dad was on the gangster squad, and obviously it's all hands on deck on something like this, right? A lot of pressure on the police department to solve it. So gangster squad, not necessarily homicide investigators, but probably used as a resource pool to get out there and start asking questions. And like in the movie, you take that stuff serious, and sometimes you take it personal. This one is one you'd want to take personal. So tell us about what your dad was doing at the time, how he got involved in the case, what he talked to you about, and who he thought the suspect was.
Well, the gangster squad at the time wasn't under detectives. They were out of the chief's office, and they worked for a deputy chief, Burns. But what happened was about a year after the murder, so this would be 48, Dr. DeRiver, the police psychiatrist, started getting letters from Florida from a guy who said, yeah, my buddy did this, and he did this murder, or he did the Dahlia murder, and this is what he did. And this was stuff that only the killer or an eyewitness would know. And
yeah, I heard about that.
So Dr. DeRiver talked this guy into coming back, and I guess there were like 2 interviews. I guess one of a captain from LAPD was at a hotel in a motel in Banning, and they talked to him, and he thought the guy's name was Leslie Dwayne Dillon.
The suspect.
He gave this guy information, and then the gangster squad got involved because Dillon said that she was killed because she had too much information on this gang that was robbing hotels up and down the coast. And what they do, one of them would get a job as a night captain, bellhop or bell captain, and they'd work there a couple of weeks, find out where the safe was, because back then, if you had valuables, you gave them to the desk and they put them in your in their safe, because every room didn't have a safe like they have now. So he'd work there a few days, get the information, find out about the safe, and then he'd quit. And then a week or so later, the gang would come back and rob them, take everything out of the safe. And there was usually a lot of jewelry, expensive jewelry in these places, and fence it. And she supposedly was the girlfriend of one or more of the guys in this gang, and she knew too much. So the boss of the gang said, go kill her. And the killer just got carried away. That was the story that this Leslie Dwayne Dillon had. So what happened was they had him, and my dad told me that they took him. Driver thought that he could get him to confess if he got him into the psychological state he was in when he killed Elizabeth Short. So he says, well, let's go to this motel and you can tell me all about it. And my dad, it was supposed to be in Malibu, I believe, which was rural at the time. And they went to this motel, and my dad and Con Keeler bugged the one room, and they had the adjoining room. And the driver's in there, and they're listening in the other room, and they get Dylan up into a real good psychological state. Well, Dr. DeRiver thought that Dylan was going to kill him, so he runs out of the room before he got a confession or anything.
Ooh.
But so Dylan thinks he's assisting the police to find the murderer, so they take him and they're going up and down the coast saying, yeah, we robbed this motel, we robbed this hotel, this hotel, this hotel. And they take him all the way up to San Francisco. And up in San Francisco, he starts acting really strange. So they start handcuffing him to the bed at night. Now he realizes that he just could possibly be a suspect in this. And LAPD, it's obviously something we wouldn't do now. And but they kept him in custody and brought him. They were bringing him back down to L.A. and they got him down to L.A. and they had him. They were taking him out to breakfast one day, but they had two detectives with him. He says, "Well, let me buy a newspaper," and he slips a note to the newsstand guy. And there was a Aggie Underwood was a reporter for the L.A. Herald, and this guy sends a note. Dylan gives this note, and it says, "Hey, I'm being held incommunicado by LAPD," and and he gives his name, gives some information. Well, they get it to this Aggie Underwood, and she sends us a story, and she starts calling and puts some story in the Herald, and well, now LAPD has to do something. The gangster squad has to do something. Now there's interdepartmental politics going on at the time,
Sure.
because the case actually belongs to homicide, and the two detectives, one was named Harry Hansen, and the other one was Finis Brown, who was Thad Brown's brother. Thad Brown was the chief of detectives. So the politics is that the gangster squad, all their information has to, they have to give it to Finis Brown. Well, Finis Brown is knocking all their reports in. They don't know what they're doing, especially anything that makes his first investigation look bad. Well, this really irritates Dr. DeRiver. He goes to the grand jury and wants to get Finis Brown kicked out of there because he thinks they're destroying evidence. Anyhow, after the note, after this Aggie Underwood gets the information, the word gets out, they have to do something. So they think they have enough information. They take him to one of the outer divisions and book him in for murder. And they're trying to get some of the information so they can make a case, a strong case on him. And when Finis Brown finds out about it, they kick him loose, saying there's pending further investigation. Well, he goes back east. Apparently, has some relative. Con Keeler told me it was Oklahoma. It might have been Illinois, but one of his relatives was the governor, so they know they're not going to extradite him. But he wants to sue LAPD for false imprisonment, which he had a really good case. Con Keeler told me that it was like for $3 million, but it was probably a lot less than that back then. And so he gets a call from this attorney in San Pedro who's representing Dylan, and he says, yeah, we're going to sue you and we're going to do this. And Con says, oh, that's great. And Con had gone out and he got Dylan ID'd on one of the robberies of a hotel, I think in Santa Monica. So he says, that's great. He says, you can do that. But when Dylan comes back for the case, I have a warrant for his arrest for armed robbery. So bring him in and we'll settle this thing in. Well, of course, Dylan's not going to come back. And the attorney just saw money flying out the window, I'm sure.
Right.
But
there's something here though. So Leslie Dillon, right?
yeah,
He also has some background, right? There's the
that's
picture of
him.
him, right? There's a background that he had some kind of medical training.
Yeah, that's
And
my question.
that's why him and the doctor were probably, in my mind, after you read everything, him and the doctor rise to being the two main suspects is because he had some medical training. Can you explain that?
He apparently worked at one time for a mortician, so that could be part of it. He also supposedly had worked for a butcher at one time. The other thing is Mark Hansen. Con Keeler told me that he had a persona where he just let everybody think he was a dumb Swede who got lucky in business, and that's why he was wealthy and had all these businesses. But Con Keeler had a friend that he met at a police seminar or something who was a bigwig in the Swedish police or Norwegian police, wherever it was. And so he had him check. And supposedly Mark Hansen had gone 2 years to some medical school before he dropped out.
So now we have three suspects who have some kind of medical training, and Hansen probably was the closest of all of them to her because he worked for her, right? So
yeah, and Dylan and Hansen had some connections. I don't know exactly what they were, but they had some connection where they did business. Con always thought that the jewelry they were getting was being fenced to Mark Hansen.
Which would not be unusual in Hollywood, I could tell you that.
Right.
Yeah. But what really ticked off the gangster squad was about a year later, one of the guys who went to Hansen's parties was a Hollywood homicide detective named C.C. It might have been a Hansen too, C.C. Hansen, but him and Thad Brown and Finis Brown were driving new Mercurys, and Mark Hansen supposedly had a Mercury dealership, So they thought, and they were friends. They did know each other before this murder happened, and they eliminated Finis Brown eliminated him as a suspect after interviewing him because he said, "Well, I haven't seen her in so many months," and they didn't really thoroughly investigate Mark Hansen, and he was a suspect at the start because the suspect mailed in some stuff to one of the newspapers, and they called the police, and it had some of her possessions that she had when she was killed, and one of them was a yearbook, I think from 1937, but a date book, and it stenciled on the front was Mark Hansen. And he said, "Well, I think she probably stole that when she was living at my house." So,
well, one of our listeners or one of our viewers said that he thinks the mortician is at the top of the list right after the doctor there. Well, okay, so so the Gangster Squad did have some. Well, first of all, I got to go back to first of all, why is the psychologist involved in this investigation? Number one, and of course, it just reinforces. Psychologist is in the room. He gets nervous. He runs out. Okay. If you're going to do police work, you don't run out of the room when you're about to get the goods. You know what I mean? Yeah. Maybe this is why we shouldn't have social workers doing police work, right?
That could be a reason.
Yeah, you got to go with that.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I remember hearing about that guy, Leslie, whatever his name is.
Leslie Dwayne Dillon.
That he was a medic or some shit like that, mortician. But also when Elroy looked at the file, Guess whose other name was in there? One of the viewers even brought that name up. L. Ron Hubbard was in there. He was in the file. So now I'm wondering if there was a lot of people that sickos that convoluted together, especially with Hanson and that place where she was living with Hanson.
Yeah.
And Hodel did date her. He admitted it on tape that he dated her a couple times.
Oh.
That they're all involved in somehow. You know, it's totally convoluted. It blows my mind, but
so you're saying you're a conspiracy theorist, huh, John?
well, you know, let me put it this way: when it comes to the vaccine and COVID, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm right. End of story.
So here's we got one of our Liz was killed in January 1947, maybe by Hodel, maybe connected to the Crowley Parson Hubbard cult, blood rituals, open portal, first UFOs. Later in 1947, gave us Crowley's Lamb. Well, here's the deal, Buzz. You know, you had the closest connection to investigators involved in the case that we could talk to, and in your mind, based upon that communication, it was Leslie Dillon, right? That's who they thought.
Yeah, Leslie Dillon, and maybe in connection with Mark Hansen, or maybe Mark Hansen did it with Leslie Dwayne Dillon. I mean, it would make sense that Dillon would bring the gal to Hansen if they were giving the jewelry to Hansen Defense. So yeah. I mean, and my dad was 100% sure that Dillon was a suspect.
There we go. I think we're gonna go with your dad, but you know, as one of our guys says, we will never really know. And I like another comment here. That's right. It's only a conspiracy until somebody admits it, right? So, and which is not going to happen. So I think we'll probably, if we're still doing these, 15 years from now, there'll be another movie on the Black Dahlia, and we'll have another suspect.
Well, other people are still investigating it now, and I think pretty soon you're going to find out there's going to be evidence that will show that who the real suspect is, and I think it'll be Dillon. And
well, it's clearly the sexual motivation is the biggest part of this crime. I don't think revenge or anything. I think that's the biggest driver here, and I can't believe you only do this once. If you get away from it, you do it more than once.
Yeah.
But hey, thank you guys for coming on the show. I got to wrap up here. Again, you can catch Morning Coffee with the Chief on Pop Culture Minefield on YouTube at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, both here on YouTube and on Rumble. Be sure to like the show, make a comment, and share with a friend. This has been a really fun one, and I will have to bring this team back again for another Elroy book/movie if you guys are up for it. Stick around for the debrief afterwards. Martin, you can take it away.
Ma, I'm doing a show! Ma, I'm doing a show!